Hello and welcome to the second episode of the Healthy Highlife Podcast with me, Malcolm, a strength and mobility coach, passionate about health, fitness, wellness, as well as cannabis. My mission with this podcast is to spread the message to how cannabis can be used as a productive tool in order to enhance our lifestyle, wellness, fitness, and the like, rather than hinder it, as long as we use it with the right intentions and work on the development of our relationship that surrounds it. If you're joining me for the first time, thank you so much and welcome to the Healthy Highlife Podcast, a place where we're looking to bring the community together for those who might be struggling and falling victim to some of those stereotypes that negatively impact our lives, and for those on the other end of the camp who have come full circle and figured out how to become productive stoners, get their shit done, maintain a productive and driven outlook on life, but whilst utilizing the plant to their benefit and advantage. So before we go any further, I'd love to know what flower you've got. I've gone for the Gelato Ice by Canatique, an indica dominant strain known for some happy socializing effects. So let's see how that does us in this episode. So as we get this rolled up, let's dive into the topics of today, being the Munchies. If you're here for the first episode, you will have heard how we dove into setting the intention and the purpose around using cannabis. So let's break down the Munchies, what causes them, how we can manage them, and how we can turn this side of cannabis into an effective tool rather than hindering things like our fitness journeys, for example. Now, the thing is, Munchies aren't just a stoner stereotype, because they are rooted in real science. Like, there are things going on in the brain that when we take on things like THC, that our dopamine release is affected. We want more of it. We're looking for more food, like our appetite is stimulated through the release of things like ghrelin, the hunger hormone. So all of these signals are leading us to a situation where if we're not set up in such a way to withstand these signals, we're more likely to give in to them and ultimately give in to the binge or the munchies. But depending on the person, things like the munchies could be a great tool, because the same system that makes you crave those foods in an episode of the munchies could actually help you build muscle and recover faster. So if used again with the right intention for the right job at the time, you can actually get a lot more from this than you may give it credit for. So before we get into it, let's just dive into some of the science that surrounds it. In the first episode, we very briefly touched on the endocannabinoid system in the body and how we have things called CB1 and CB2 receptors in the brain. These are known for regulating our appetite. The system also directly regulates our immune system. So it's a very, very important system. And so when things like exogenous THC binds to these receptors, it's going to increase and amplify, just as we touched on in the first episode, it's going to amplify where you already are. Along with that initial need for more dopamine is that whole experience that most of us experience when we first started engaging with the plant, which is that heightened, everything's a bit brighter, everything tastes amazing, smells amazing, all that kind of stuff. And ultimately, if you fall down the path of mindless use, you end up, as I mentioned in the first episode, at a point of diminishing returns where you have to then just use more and more and more to even get a taste of what you once felt. This is where the need for things like tolerance breaks comes in, but that's for a future episode. So I briefly mentioned ghrelin earlier, known as the hunger hormone, and this signals the brain that it's time to eat. And if stimulated and signaled, even though you may have just eaten, it's still going to tell you to eat. And again, if your relationship surrounding food is not in the best place, and that's paired with not the best relationship around cannabis, then ultimately that's going to lead you to not the best outcome. However, if you are able to bring awareness to both your cannabis use and also bring positive awareness to your nutrition, well, then windows of munchies don't have to be detriments or derailments to your journey, but actually you can learn to overcome or utilize these periods of time to your benefit. But when you've got physiological signals telling you to eat, and you've also got potential emotional, situational, or environmental triggers also telling you to eat, it's definitely a recipe for what could also be seen as a binge. And that comes to our relationship with food. If we get caught in these binge and restrict cycles, which I spend a lot of time talking to my clients about. So let's just say on that note, if all you've got in your house is a load of munchy friendly foods, and right, munchy friendly, I mean the stereotypical like cookies and shit like that, some crisps or chips or whatever, and your relationship that surrounds food is not in the best place, and your body's telling you it wants more because it's mimicking natural hunger signals, well, then you're going to choose those higher calorie processed foods because guess what? Those processed, higher calorie, sugary, shitty foods are also made and engineered in a way to want to make you eat more because they just want you to spend more and buy more of their product. They don't really give a fuck about your health. That's a little side note. So just bear that in mind. There's a lot of factors working against you if you don't bring to light some awareness that surrounds these windows of munchies. So now this is finally rolled up and we've covered a little bit of the science around munchies. Let's spark this up with intention. So my intention when I'm sparking up around a podcast episode, granted this is my second one, but this might be during my day job, it might be in my evenings, my weekends, whatever the task is or my intention and purpose is, there's always something attached to it. It's never just smoking for no reason. So for example, I'm going to spark this up, smoke this alongside you guys and talk about the munchies and hopefully get some useful messaging across that we can just bounce off each other and grow together. Because ultimately that's my mission with this podcast, is to create the space so that we can all elevate, learn and grow together. So we can smoke the loud, but we can be proud of it rather than getting put into all these bullshit stereotypes. And ultimately, in order to get away from those stereotypes, it's really just about addressing that state of awareness and then taking responsibility over that use. So back to the topic at hand, terpenes. There are terpenes out there, as we mentioned in the previous episode, that make up the effects of strains. And if we're aware of the terpene profiles and cannabinoid profiles of the strains that we have access to, we can then make educated decisions as to which strain would be the best fit for the job. If we're looking to utilize cannabis as a tool to enhance appetite, we might look for strains that are higher in myrcene because that tends to have an appetite stimulating effect. We may also look for terpenes like limonene. These enhance our sensory perception, which makes flavors and aromas and all of that kind of stuff that much more fucking awesome. So if we're someone who struggles to eat for whatever reason, it might be just an appetite thing, or it might be a disorder of some kind, we can then use this plant as a tool with the right intention and the right decisions around strains in order to get the right outcome. So it's all well and good being able to use it as a tool to enhance appetite. And for the majority of us, we don't seem to have a problem with enhancing appetite. It's not the weed's fault in that moment that your appetite is enhanced, although we've covered that there is a scientific mechanism going on which does play into that. It's not that hard for your appetite to be amplified. It's most likely a multitude of different reasons that are all playing into this one result. You may not be hitting your daily protein or fiber requirements. You may be living on convenience and processed food. You might have vitamin deficiencies. You may not be addressing your sleep, in which case, if you get shitty sleep, you're more likely to make shitty decisions with food and activity in the days to follow. Pair that with an unintentional, purposeless use of cannabis, and ultimately that leads you down the path of a binge, aka munchies. So what happens when you do get that heightened hunger signal, when THC hits the brain, and all you can focus on is the munchies? Well, you could set yourself up for success before that. Prep up some healthy snacks. Get some stuff in the house that isn't just the only option is cookies and chips and soft drinks. Maybe get things like Greek yogurts, berries. I mean, there's lots of like protein yogurts out there these days. You can make a high protein smoothie. Basically, prepare yourself from an environmental perspective. In your house, make sure that you don't have cupboards full of snacks. A useful thing when it comes to helping with your relationship around food and mindful eating is, okay, well, how can we put a barrier in between you and the impulse, essentially? So let's say you've got the impulse, whether you're high or not, to go and binge on X, right? Not eggs, X. Could be anything. Bar of dairy milk. or popcorn or whatever your trigger food of choice may be. So I'm going to tell you, it's not that you can't have it or that you shouldn't have it, but what I am going to say is set a few boundaries that surround it. Instead of just buying it mindlessly at the supermarket during the weekly food shop, say to yourself, okay, you know what? I can have that chocolate bar, but I'm not going to just have the multi-pack. I'm not just going to have it in the house. If I want it, I can go and get it, but I'm going to have to put my shoes on and go to the shop and buy it in that moment. Now, if you actually do follow through on putting your shoes on, putting your jacket on, walking out or driving all the way down to the shop just for that, then fair play, you probably really wanted it. But the chances are, if you set that intention around that snack from now on, the amount of times that you would have followed through on that binge in the past would almost have been 100%. But now that you've set that one boundary, it's not that you can't have it. It's just that you have to go through a few more steps in order to get to it. Well, the chances are you're going to follow through less frequently on those occasions. And over time, that's going to yield a net positive. The other one that would help with that, just to layer on top, let's say you have set the intention to not have it in the house, but if you want it, you'll go and get it. Just make sure that when you do go and get it, you also have a secondary layer, a secondary safety net, something along the lines of, I'll only buy a single serving. And with those two boundaries attached to some trigger foods as such, you can have great success around that. And even that alone will deter you or allow you to pivot around a binge or a Munchies episode. I touched on it earlier, but making sure that you're generally hitting your daily protein and fiber intake will determine the success of it all. If you are naturally satiated throughout your day, you're not leaving yourself open to windows of hunger, missing meals, skipping breakfast, eating cereals or granolas for breakfast and spiking your blood sugar throughout the day. If you're avoiding those type of scenarios, then you're more likely to succeed when you do feel the munchies come on, because your body's not just giving you a false state of hunger. If you start your day with high protein, and you carry that protein intake across your day, your body and your blood glucose levels are going to stay nice and level, which are going to lead you away from these erratic energy crashes and cravings that you probably have to battle with most of your day. Just as I covered myrcene and limonene when it comes to enhancing or increasing the appetite, we can look to strains that have things like humulene or pinene in. Humulene, known for its suppressing effects, which can actually then counterbalance these THC-infused hunger. And pinene enhances mental clarity, but it will also reduce impulsive behaviors. And if you pair that along with working on your general relationship, both psychologically, emotionally, and environmentally around food, you can then create a setting of success when it comes to the munchies. Another little side note is a lot of us tend to confuse thirst for hunger. So making sure that you're consuming plenty of water throughout your day and your body is hydrated at all times will lead you away from these false cravings triggered by dehydration. That's how we can overcome and pivot around it. But what happens when we want to use it, and how can it be a good thing when it comes to our nutrition? Well, if we're training super hard and our goal is to build a physique or to work on endurance and energy output and so on, using high THC cannabis strains in order to enhance the appetite will allow you to then replenish those glycogen stores that have been depleted through heavy, intense bouts of working out. And when it comes to wanting to build a metabolism, build a physique, build some lean muscle, ultimately we have to nail the recovery aspect, because that's where all the magic happens. So if we can increase our intake of good quality whole foods, having worked on our relationship around food, we can then consume the necessary calories required to build and fuel the metabolism that then ultimately builds the muscle that then gives you that whole lean, mean, fat burning machine type effect on the body. So things like high protein meals, chicken, rice, protein smoothies, steak, potatoes, tuna, anything, a quick Google on high protein foods will get you there. It's about bringing awareness to that and taking the steps to take action and put that into your life. Because if you do, things like the munchies and the negative side of munchies will start to dissipate, and you'll then be able to have conscious control over your choices as to how you're going to use cannabis, whether or not you need it for recovery, for an increase in appetite, or whatever that may be. Now, just as we've covered THC enhances the need and the kind of the signals for hunger and whatnot, it can also help improve your relationship with food if you set the intention to attach yourself and explore the triggers and the emotions that surround the food you're eating, having just utilized cannabis beforehand. It can give you ways in which to explore your relationship with that and allow you to work on it in ways in which you may not have been able to had you not have experienced it using the plant. And then when it comes to the whole success around nutrition, especially from a fitness perspective, it's always the whole consistency is key thing. And in order to nail consistency, for the most part, many people, myself included, have success with meal preps. But a massive barrier to meal preps is, I can't eat the same thing over and over. It's just bland meals, this, that, and the other. So if you were to set the intention, have a little smoke and plan your meal prep and go and do it, because of the heightened sensory experience, you're going to have a more creative and uplifting outlook as to how you're going to create that. So the result of that meal prep is most likely going to tick more of the boxes in terms of your enjoyment as well as your nutritional needs, having been carried out and planned through the intentional use of the plant, compared to just a willy-nilly boring meal prep that gets you bored halfway through the week that you don't stick to. And just to the side note of building the metabolism and how you can use the munchies and how you can use this to aid your repair. Well, a lot of these strains have crossovers in terpene profiles, as well as using limonene to boost your appetite. It can also help boost your digestion, which means that your post-workout meals are going to be more enjoyable and a lot more absorbable, which is crucial when it comes to getting nutrients into the tissue and aiding that recovery for progress. So hopefully you enjoyed diving into some of the science around munchies and how THC interacts with our ECS and enhances and stimulates some of those perceptions. Hopefully I brought up a few points of awareness when it comes to your relationship around nutrition, managing cravings, and your overall health and wellness alongside nutrition. So things like hitting that protein and fiber intake will take care of a lot of other things, which will lead you down a much simpler, more productive path of nutrition and fitness. Things like portion control or healthy snacks and planning and pre-prepping meals and snacks ahead of episodes of Munchies, so that you've got a better option to turn to in the moment. Setting some boundaries and barriers around trigger foods, like not having them in the house. You're allowed to have it, just make sure you don't have it in the house. And if you do go to the shop to get it, after having decided you really fucking want it, well then only buy a single serving. And how Munchies can actually be a powerful tool as post-workout recovery and for those struggling with appetite, as well as those who struggle to not curb the appetite and can actually take use from it in other ways. So please, down below, if you've got any ideas or tips that you want to share in the comments, to those who are looking for inspiration, maybe some healthy munchies ideas that you've experimented with, maybe you've gone through your own journey with nutrition and you figured out how to get the best out of both, chuck that down in the comments. Please hit the like and subscribe button. And I'll see you in the next episode, where we're going to dive into how we can utilize cannabis for recovery, pre-workout, and movement and the like. Thank you very much. Take care. Have a good week.